Hey there, everybody. Welcome to my Abu Dhabi adventure. I am your host, Tom Funk. Thanks for joining me. And thank you to Adam Main for the use of his music. Bone Cold, name of the song, off of Burton Slowdown. Thank you, Adam. And if you've been with me since the beginning, thank you. And if you are new, I moved to Abu Dhabi last year. In fact, last year today. Yes, I am celebrating my 1-year anniversary living in Abu Dhabi. And so much has happened since I moved here, and you can get caught up by listening to all my previous podcasts. I was originally coming to you once a week because so much was happening and I was experiencing new things nearly on a daily basis. And, I backed off to once a month as I have settled in, and you probably don't want to hear a repeat of a bus riding adventure or another visit to the Yas Mall. This will likely be my last podcast of the year as I am traveling home for the remainder of December. I leave on Saturday the 10th with my son Nathaniel for a trip back to the United States, to Michigan, with a side trip to warm and sunny Texas to visit his grandparents. I come to you today on UAE's Commemoration Day and National Day weekend. Commemoration Day is like Memorial Day in the United States, celebrating those that have served and given their life. National Day is like our Independence Day. So, Commemoration Day is held every year to recognize the dedication and sacrifices of the UAE's military and civilian service people and to honor those who lost their lives while serving their country. The late President Sheikh Khalifa introduced Commemoration Day in 2015. And it originally took place on November 30th to commemorate the death of Salem Suhail Khamis, who died on the same day in 1971, fighting against Iranian forces on the island of Greater Tumb. He is thought to have been the first Emirati to be killed in military service since the formation of the UAE. Then, we are celebrating National Day. Unlike in the United States, where we have an Independence Day, from Great Britain, and there are about 75 other countries that celebrate their independence from this once colonial power. United Arab Emirates did not have to fight for its independence from Britain, although Great Britain did play a role. So, with the expansion of European colonial empires, the Portuguese, English, and Dutch forces appeared in the Persian Gulf region, and by the 18th century, the Bani Yas Confederation here in Abu Dhabi was a dominant force here. And in the north, there was the Al-Qawasim, which dominated the maritime commerce. So the Portuguese, they came in, maintained an influence over the coastal settlements. They built forts. There was a bloody 16th century conquest of coastal communities by Albuquerque and the Portuguese commanders who followed him, particularly on the east coast at Muscat, Sohar, and Khor Fakhan. The southern coast of the Persian Gulf was known to the British and Westerners as the Pirate Coast, as boats of the Al-Qawasim Federation harassed British-flagged shipping from the 17th century into the 19th century. So, this charge of piracy is hotly disputed by modern Emirati historians, including the current ruler of Sharjah, who wrote a book about it, The Myth of Arab Piracy in the Gulf. I haven't read it yet, but it is on my to-read list. Let's just say there was maritime disagreements. Basically, the folks living in this region claim the waters as theirs, call it piracy, call it tribute, call it a tax, call it a fee. Let's just say it was a maritime conflict. So what ended up happening is the tribes living in this area kept harassing the British ships and things like that. And the British was trying to protect their Indian trade routes. And they would actually lead military campaigns against some of the sheikdoms. and included a few of them that were kind of considered small wars, like the Persian Gulf Campaign of 1809, and there was one in 1819. Well, in the following year, in 1820, Britain and a number of local rulers here signed a maritime truce, giving rise to the term trucial states. So some of you old-timers who are older than the UAE, which is 51 years old, may remember that term trucial states. Well, this came to define the status of the coastal emirates. And a further treaty was signed in 1843, and in 1853 another one was agreed to. And basically what ended up happening is the trucial states became a British protectorate. So under the 1892 treaty, the trucial sheiks agreed not to dispose of any territory except to the British and not to enter into any relationships with any foreign government other than the British without their consent. In return, the British promised to protect the trucial coast from all aggression by sea and to help in case of land attack. So this was signed on by the rulers of Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Sharjah, Ajman, Ras Al Khaimah, and Al Quwain, and it was subsequently ratified by the Governor General of India and the British government in London. So British maritime policing meant that pearling fleets could operate in relative security. However, the British prohibition of the slave trade meant an important source of income was lost to some of the merchants and sheikhs. So this treaty managed the relationship between Britain and the various sheikdoms for almost 150 years. But in 1966, it became clear to the British government it could no longer afford to administer and protect what is now the United Arab Emirates. So British members of Parliament debated the preparedness of the Royal Navy to defend the sheikdoms. The British Armed Forces were seriously overstretched at the time, and in some respects dangerously under-equipped to defend the sheikdoms. So on the 24th of January, 1968, British Prime Minister Harold Wilson announced the government's decision, and it was reaffirmed in 1971 by Prime Minister Edward Heath, to end the treaty relationships with the 7 trucial sheikdoms that had been together with Bahrain and Qatar under British protection. So days after the announcement, the ruler of Abu Dhabi, Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Nahyan, fearing vulnerability because no longer the British to protect them, he tried to persuade the British to honor the protection treaties by offering to pay the full cost of keeping the British armed forces in the Emirates. Now keep in mind, oil had been discovered here, and they had quite a bit of resources. And, these Emirates, they didn't have a military, so they thought this treaty was a fantastic deal. They get military protection, they could carry on their own business internally, and they just didn't have to, raid British ships. So it was a great deal. But they were informed here in Abu Dhabi that the British was going to withdraw, and what ended up happening is the 9 Arabian Gulf sheikdoms attempted to form a union of Arab Emirates, but by mid-1971, they were still unable to agree on terms of union, even though the British treaty relationship was to expire in December of that year. And read a couple of books, and oh my gosh, the disagreement, there's pages and pages and pages of these leaders kind of arguing back and forth of what they wanted to agree to. So it wasn't just a simple disagreement. It was pretty complex. Anyways, fears of vulnerability were realized a day before independence. So what ended up happening is everybody else is paying attention, and an Iranian destroyer group broke formation from an exercise in the lower Gulf and went to the Tumb Islands. And these islands were taken by force, civilians and Arab defenders alike allowed to flee. There was a British warship, but it stood idle during the course of the invasion. And a destroyer group approached the island of Abu Musa as well, but there Sheikh Khalid bin Mohammed al-Qasimi, he had negotiated with the Iranian Shah, and the island was quickly released to Iran for $3 million a year. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia laid claims to swaths of Abu Dhabi. So, as you can see, things were falling apart without British protection. Originally intended to be part of the proposed Federation of Arab Emirates, Bahrain became independent in August and Qatar in September of 1971. When the British Trucial Sheikdoms Treaty expired on the 1st of September 1971, both of those emirates became fully independent. On the 2nd of December 1971, in Dubai, 6 of the emirates, Abu Dhabi, Ajman, Dubai, Fujairah, Sharjah, and Al Quwain, agreed to the union, and called themselves the United Arab Emirates. The last emirate, Ras Al Khaimah, joined it later, and on January 10th, 1972. So it was a country, right? And we celebrate our 51st year this year. In February of 72, the Federal National Council was created, and it was a 40-member consultative body appointed by the 7 rulers. The UAE joined the Arab League on the 6th of December 1971, and the United Nations on the 9th of December. And it was a founding member of the Gulf Cooperation Council in May 1981. So you may see me reference, or you may see in the news, the GCC, that's the Gulf Cooperation Council. So, the modern history of the Emirates is quite fascinating. I've read quite a bit about it, and I find it fascinating. It's quite different than how America came about. I think what is even more fascinating is the ancient human history of the region. So, this past weekend, 4-day weekend for us, we're like, okay, let's do some stuff. I knew that on Thursday, that would be a day where people would not do very much. A lot of places were closed, so we kind of chilled. Friday, we went to the Emirates Park Zoo. Saturday, I said, hey, what do you want to do? And he mentioned an archaeological site in Sharjah that had a human occupation 125,000 years ago. So I immediately doubted the 125,000 year figure. And last I remember, the earliest humans to have been known to archaeology outside of Africa date only to 50,000 years ago in Europe and the Levant. So he couldn't remember the name, so we started Googling it, and lo and behold, there is a series of archaeological sites in Sharjah in and around the city of Malaiha. So our field trip for this weekend was to this archaeological center in Malaiha, where we took in the museum, and we took, basically, they call it a SOG, an S-O-G, not sure what it means, but it's a very large vehicle that can go through sand, and we took a ride out into the desert to a spot along the Jebel Faya, which is a limestone hill system with numerous small caves. So, this is so cool. Human occupation has been traced back to the emergence of anatomically modern humans from Africa from 125,000 years ago through finds here at Jebel Faya. So they found all these burial sites dating back to the Neolithic and the Bronze Age, which is much later than this, or actually closer in time to our current time. So including the oldest known such inland site, which is over at Jebel Buhais. So this area was home to a prosperous Bronze Age trading culture, which occurred between India, Bahrain, Mesopotamia, as well as Iran and the Levant. So they know this because they found all kinds of items like coins, jewelry, pottery, tools, things like that found here at the site. And the Iron Ages saw the emergence of nomadism as well as the development of water management and irrigation systems supporting human settlement both along the coast and the interior. So stone tools recovered here reveal a settlement of people from Africa some 127,000 years ago, and a stone tool used for butchering animals discovered on the Arabian coast suggests an even older habitation from 130,000 years ago. So there's no proof of contact with the outside world at that stage, although in time lively trading links developed with civilizations, as I mentioned, like in Iran, Mesopotamia, in India. So this contact persisted and became wider and probably motivated by the trade in copper from the nearby Hajar Mountains, and that commenced around 3000 BC. So the archaeological history here in the UAE, it dates back more than 100,000 years. So this makes for the oldest human habitation ever found outside of Africa. So we took a guided tour, and the question I asked was, why here? Why has this been a crossroads for humanity for over 100,000 years? Well, the guide basically said, simply put, there's food, there's water, there's shelter here, along with copper, tin, and iron for making tools and other items. And it became kind of a crossroads for traders coming from the north, south, east, and west. So They would come together at this spot. They could stay there. There's food there. There's water there. They could trade and then go on. So that's why we find these items here from all over Europe, Asia, and Africa. So visiting this archaeological center, definitely a top 10 activity for me in the past year. And as I mentioned before, we visited the Emirates Park Zoo in Abu Dhabi. And, we found out this place is more than a zoo. It has an arcade, a resort, a spa, and even a medical clinic. It was only built in 2008, so it's a new zoo. And about half the zoo is a children's zoo, and the other half is split between walking in an outdoors pathway with exhibits on either side of the path. And the rest you can view the animals from an indoor, air-conditioned hallway, essentially. And they have, several quote-unquote houses, like a reptile house, a small mammal house, and even a small aquarium. It was definitely a different kind of zoo experience, and I will someday get a video up of our visits you can see for yourself. There was a lot of cool, goofy, weird kind of art stuff there. You'll need to see the video when I get it out. All right. So, that was a cool thing to do, and we're also, since it's, Saturday here, we're going to, on Sunday, do some Christmas shopping at a souk that I found. I think I may have mentioned a month or two ago. All right, bumper music means we are almost done. Hey, a week from today, my feet will be on U.S. soil, and I am trying to make a trip to Grand Rapids, Kalamazoo, and Battle Creek. So if you want to come and shake my hand, or give me a hug, or punch me in the nose, I'd love to have you do so. Well, except for punch me in the nose. Just pay attention to my Tom's Worldly Adventures Facebook page and my personal Facebook page, as I am depending on others to help arrange these. So this means this is the last podcast for 2022. Thank you so much for listening. And I hope I've given you a perspective on what it is like to live in a Middle Eastern country. You guys, I'm telling you, this has been an awesome experience living here, and I wouldn't give it up for the world, and I look forward to being here for probably a few more years. Heck, maybe I'll retire here. Who knows? All right, folks, thank you so much for listening. I hope to see you stateside, and if not, next year. And again, follow my shenanigans on social media. The one you want to pay attention to is Tom Funk's Worldly Adventures on Facebook, and Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok are Tom's Worldly Adventures. So that's where I'll be putting most of my stuff. And just pay attention, and hopefully I'll see you when I'm home. All right, take care. See you next year.